President Trump has already proven the most consequential leader in a generation, and one of the most revolutionary in our nation's 250-year history. But he faces a powerful, well-funded, and ruthless enemy bent on halting the movement to restore America in its tracks. I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic Party going into the November 2026 midterm elections. Will Republicans earn another mandate to make America great again? Or will Democrats emerge triumphant with an agenda to impeach Trump, restore globalist rule, and plunge the country into darkness for 2 more years? That's the question today on Restoration Spotlight. I'm Hayden Ludwig. Here to share his insights is Restoration of America CEO Doug Truax, one of the sharpest strategists shaping the populist conservative movement today. Doug is a West Point grad, former Army Ranger, successful entrepreneur, and founder of one of the most dynamic and rapidly growing organizations in politics. Doug, we appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on, Hayden. Great to see you.
Now, many fear the thrashing that we got in the 2025 election bodes poorly for the upcoming midterms. Now, others say that the elections in Virginia, New Jersey, and New York City are just blue voters electing blue politicians in a blue state. Doug, who's got that right?
Well, I think it's a combination. I definitely going into those elections, obviously, especially in New York City, but, can't forget that Virginia and New Jersey are mostly blue, and a little different, obviously, when Trump won. But, there's a movement here that we got to be careful of, and that is this affordability piece is making everybody think a little differently. And so it's shifting the dynamic of what's going on with the baseline voter, because when you had a presidential with Trump, you definitely have that phenomenon of the Trump-only voter. And so, as much as that does exist and it's a real thing, we saw that in Virginia for sure, some in New Jersey, and that made the gap widen. But you have a couple of things working here where you have a situation where Trump's not on the ballot, and so you're missing out on a certain portion of the people that were going to vote, that would have voted if he was on the ballot. And then you also have this ongoing economic problem, which was a huge reason why Trump won. So, we're kind of in this middle ground. I wasn't surprised that New Jersey and Virginia happened the way they happened. I was a little surprised by the margin. And that goes to these things that I'm talking about. So it's a combination, and we got to be aware of that. And we got to be thinking very clearly going now into 2026, because as you know, midterms for the presidents right after they get elected is usually not a pretty thing. So we got to be thinking about how we're going to do this going forward. But on balance, I would say that there's a little bit of truth in both sides of those things.
Right. So you're distinguishing between Republican voters on the one hand who consistently show up and vote pretty much straight ticket Republican, regardless of who's at the top, and then Trump-only voters, as you said, people who show up when President Trump or Donald Trump is on the top of the ticket, but didn't show up for Republicans in any of these states in 2025. Of course, we're going into the midterms here. We have bare Republican majorities in the House and the Senate. And historically, as you pointed out, the trend lines aren't good for the president's party holding on to power in the first midterm of his presidential tenure. Well, the key here is going to be bucking that trend by activating those Trump-only voters here. That seems like a very different strategy, a sea change in grand strategy than the traditional GOP has employed. Give us some idea of how we begin to shift resources in that direction and what we need to do differently as a party.
Yeah, it's significant, and it could be a big problem. And to your point about traditional Republican voters, on the spectrum, you have what we call 404 voters, who are the people that vote all the time in the primaries, even in non-presidential years. You can count them all the time. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have people, traditionally, that you could only count on to vote in a general in the presidential. You go a little further out on the spectrum, you have the people that only showed up for Trump. And so that's the tricky thing here is you got to say, okay, what were they voting for when they did vote for Trump? Which certainly there is a piece to the Trump only voter that is around Trump's personality. But really, what was Trump? He was a let's just turn the tables over. throw the bums out kind of thing. And, people are really fed up, and he represented all of that to them. So how do you get them to embrace that feeling and come back out in the midterm? It's a very tall order. But I can tell you this, we have gotten much better over the years now in terms of just like, do we know this person voted, and do we have a good sense that they voted in that election and voted conservative? Okay, how do we then, as a party, this is where at Restoration America, we're heavy into this now. We know they've got a ballot. They haven't turned it in yet. Let's go make sure they turn it in, whether that's calling them, emailing them, texting them, going to their door, all kinds of stuff that can happen to make sure that they get that ballot in. So we do have a problem on our hands with that Trump-only voter, but we have been working on the solution as we've gone forward here to hopefully get to a place where we can say, well, we know how many of them we need to get in order to have a shot at this. Now let's go get it done. So, but it's a unique problem. Trump's a unique guy in a unique time, and so just one of those situations you just got to deal with. And we're working on getting it figured out here. And I'm encouraged. There's people around the country that are doing the same thing, but we're doing our part here for sure.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is encouraging to people who are thinking, oh no, what's going to happen when Trump's no longer on the ballot after this cycle is up, the next cycle is up? What you're really pointing out is, well, it's a data problem in part. It's also a communications problem. You got to talk in the language that these non-traditional voters understand. But we now know who they are, who has a ballot, who hasn't yet turned that ballot in, how they vote or don't vote, as the case may be, and where they live. That's not something that the Republican Party had when Trump first ran, not to the degree that we have right now. That seems to me to be the difference as you're laying it out.
Yeah, it's a really big deal. I think that we were way behind. The Democrats, they have like organizing in their DNA, the collectivist mentality.
Yes, exactly.
And they got the unions, and they got all their stuff, and they've been working on this, and they knew where people were. And frankly, sometimes they have a much easier job of it because they're concentrated in urban areas, and so they had a lot of things in their favor. And shame on us as Republicans going back, a couple of decades. We weren't doing what we needed to do from a data side and keeping track of things, especially as much as is available to improve data and improve operations. We certainly weren't taking advantage of it. So we certainly are now. And we are here at Restoration America. Like I said, there's other people doing different things too. We're way out, tip of the spear on this stuff now, making sure that, okay, so we do know that this person voted. We would characterize them maybe as a Trump-only voter. Then how do we, at least in their mind, from a messaging standpoint, get to the point? It's like, hey, you went and voted for Trump, but you did it for the good of the country. That's, yes. It wasn't, he's the candidate, right? And he's, like I said, he's a unique guy, unique personality, but they were doing it to get their country back. And so you have to get to a place where you say, look, we still got work to do. We still need to get our country back. Now you have to have the right candidate. You can't, sometimes these are the folks that, in my estimation, I've seen a lot of polling, they're not going to vote for the establishment kind of uniparty type candidate that can be rolled out occasionally. So we got to put that away. And as much as we possibly can, it's just, and this is going right to what we do in Restoration America, let's find the most conservative candidates and elect them. And those are the types of folks, those are the types of candidates that will naturally be, they will enthuse these folks that are Trump-only voters. And then you got to start layering on, look, you came out maybe for the first time, you can't stop. The country still needs you. We got good candidates. We got to transition this thing. So it's a tall order, but, we're all talking about it, thinking about it, and we got to get it done. The nice thing is we know who these folks are because they have voted. We just have to make sure that we keep doing the work to, get them to keep buying in going forward. And I think it can be done. It's just a lot of work, for sure.
A lot of work, for sure. Now, a difficult midterm election is not unexpected. What is unexpected is this mid-decade redistricting plan that Trump has fired off in the past 6 months or so. This has never happened before in politics. Mid-decade redistricting has, but not to the degree it has, and certainly not the national scope. Because of President Trump, you now have Republicans moving to redraw the congressional maps in Texas, Florida, and many other states. Now, of course, The equal and opposite reaction has come from places like Colorado and California. As you know, in November 2025, California voters approved Gavin Newsom's redistricting plan that would try to, well, tank the final few California Republicans left in that state and try to offset some of the gains the Republicans could have. Now, obviously, nobody knows where all of this is going to land, but this could be the blender that shakes things up going into the 2026 midterms. On balance, Doug, do you think this is beneficial to the GOP, or do you think this is too risky for us and could end up backfiring and helping the Democrats?
Well, it's definitely the case in my mind, at least. Don't bring a knife to a gunfight. And these guys,
Yes.
they'll do anything, right? We've seen them. I've just been in politics long enough to just be in those moments where I can't believe the Democrats are doing that, right? And so I'm in Florida now. I was in Illinois for a long, long time. Watched it go downhill, and a lot of this kind of stuff was happening. And so this redistricting thing, it's super legit. We just didn't participate in it like we should have. And so it's that moment where if we want our country back, if we want to maintain this going forward, I know we'll get into census stuff too. I mean, there's windows of opportunity here to say, look, if we don't do this and they take over, I mean, look at New York City and Mamdani and these kinds of things that people are starting to think about with the socialists and everything and headed towards communism. We got to do our part here and make sure that we do everything we can to keep that from happening. And so, hey, I'm all for it. If we can do it, let's do it. You mentioned it kind of like the California and Colorado thing reaction. Yeah, maybe they're going to do it no matter what, right? And even if we had done our part, so it's like just got to take. That's how it is in politics. I mean, it's we're in a time of total political war. It wasn't like that when I was growing up with Reagan, and everything seemed a little more like, hey, politics is over there, the rest of us are over here. It's all blended together because there's a lot at stake, and the left wants to completely remake the country in a socialist dystopian fashion, and we got to do everything we can to stop them. And if this is on the list, let's do it.
We mentioned earlier talking in a language that voters understand, particularly non-traditional voters. One of the key issues here is affordability. I would argue Mamdani won less on a socialist platform and more on a platform of, I'll help you with your bus fare, your groceries, your gas bill if you have one, your rent, that sort of concrete promise. Trump also made those promises way back in 2016 all the way to the present. So it's not just drain the swamp, it's particular ways I'm going to make your life better. Let's talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act passed last summer. Now, the White House is saying that that's going to increase economic growth. We've already seen that in the past 2 quarters, that it has had some of that effect. But the president is pushing right now to lower borrowing rates to encourage homeownership. But again, I think the real question to families is less the big GDP and inflation cooling numbers and more about whether they're going to see real cost reductions in things like food, housing, and electricity. Now, Doug, my question to you is, there's a year before the midterm elections. Do you think we're going to see some of that economic turnaround by the time people are casting a ballot 12 months from now?
Short answer is yes. Longer answer is I'm not sure how long before. A business owner, I keep an eye on all this stuff and I have a decent sense for what's going on in the world based on how our clients are acting about different things. And I think there's a baseline level of optimism out there. It's been a very strange time with COVID and, Biden and those guys printing an extra 5 trillion or whatever it was, and we end up in this place. And so it's not like it's an easy fix. A huge reason Trump won is, like you're saying, people, hey, let's fix these problems. They're pretty big problems. And so, the administration's done a lot of different things, and I think it's having an impact, probably not as fast as they would like, obviously. There wouldn't be such a big talk about the affordability piece in the elections we just had. Sure. But there's a window of time to fix it. I think basically the economic situation is going to continue to improve into the spring and the summer. Hopefully, to your question, that's enough time. I also think that we do need to get into a situation where we say, how do we make sure that the younger generation feels like they haven't been disenfranchised out of what we've always called the American dream, which is basically, hey, let's go get a house, let's raise the kids, all that stuff. I mean, so much has happened that we have to start getting outside of the box we typically would be in and say, how do we correct this problem? You and I have talked separately about the Hungarians and what they've done to incent people to have bigger families and get houses and stuff like that. Now, obviously, we're a much bigger country, so we have to think this through a little bit. But it's the same kind of stuff, and we don't want to have a situation where over time the younger generation gives up on what we know to be, the best system you could have in a fallen world is moral capitalism. And we need to keep heading that direction, but we need to keep the younger generations on board because they haven't fully experienced it, obviously. And we got to get them there somehow. And we need to start talking seriously about that from a policy standpoint. And I certainly hope the administration is going to lean heavy into that, because if they could roll in the first quarter with some solutions like, hey, this is where we're going, and catch the eye of a lot of the younger folks, I think that would help as well. As the economy is improving, we could be in a much better place.
I'm glad you brought this up. I think in a lot of ways, young men in particular are President Trump's secret weapon. But the problem is, of course, is they expect a lot, because we're young, expect a lot of results tomorrow that can't possibly be delivered tomorrow, right? May not even be deliverable within one presidential term here. I think President Trump is paying close attention to these needs, but you also see a lot of people who voted Trump in 2024 and then voted Mamdani in 2025, and who knows, they're up for grabs in 2026. And I think, again, it goes to the affordability question here. How do Republicans get out ahead of Democrats? We know that socialists are going to make grand promises they can't possibly deliver on. How do we start communicating concrete promises that actually moral capitalism can deliver on, while also explaining, these are things that don't happen in a week, even a year. It might take a generation to solve some problems such as marriage rates and home ownership, but at least we're charting a right course towards that American dream that you articulated earlier.
Yeah, the patience factor is tough, right? Us Americans, short attention span. I think you clearly have to be articulating some policy provisions that you're going to want to put in, and I don't know that that's happened. And we got to get there as quickly as we can. It's identifying the problem. It's just saying it out loud. Hey, we recognize this is a problem. Here's what we think will fix it. And then on the tail end of that, you say, oh, by the way, this guy in New York City, let's already look and see what's happening, because I have 100% confidence it's not going to go well, right? We know that we know how this works. It's like, it's the socialists and the communists that always say, yeah, well, hey, but they figured it out this time, Hayden. These guys are the smart guys, and they got it all, it's all going to work out now, and so that's what they've always said. And so we just have to, there's an element too of letting that play out a little bit and educating along the way. And you just got to over communicate this stuff, which, can be tiring, exhausting in some points, especially when things aren't going well. But you have to at least give that cohort, that generation, hey, we understand. We get what's going on. We know the housing thing is a problem. We know BlackRock's a problem. We know all these things are a problem. And here's what we're going to do to try to fix it. And please don't fall for the lies. And by the way, it's already fallen apart. We knew it was going to fall apart. Here's what's happening. So it's a couple of things, but you got to commit to it. And, I'm hopeful that the administration, the tariff thing, I get it. We got to make sure that it all works out in our favor over time. That's a long-term thing. And I understand what's going on there, but you have got to drill down into, if we do these things and we're deliberate about it, we'll get you guys to a better place. And it's got to be real and true, because young people in particular, they see right through hypocrisy. So you can't just roll stuff out to just placate them. You got to just it's got to be real, and we got to demonstrate how this is going to work. And I think that'll work out, but we got to get going. Got to get going right now.
Yes, that's right. That's right. In other words, it's providing a genuine alternative to what the radical leftists like Zoran Mamdani are promising right now. And I think the only way you can do that, you've talked about this extensively, is through the churches. And by extension, the family. If you really want to restore a Christian nation, you have to have Christians, and you get Christians through families raising up good Christian children, and through the church preaching the gospel, and everything that flows downhill from that, including that kind of moral capitalism that really ultimately is biblical, not libertarian, it's biblical, right? The problem, as I see it, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, is you have a real divide right now between young men and young women. Now, I think some ways that divide has been exaggerated, but you do see it in things like the desire to marry and have children. That desire is really there among especially young males, but they're not able to execute on it. They're not able to get married for a multitude of reasons. Now, this is a problem, obviously, that goes far and beyond a single presidential term. But it does seem to me that an organization like Restoration of America is well positioned to talk to pastors and priests and churches, the institutions that are capable of helping these young people overcome those sinful problems, pair off, marry, and start living Christian lives with all the fruit that comes downstream from that. So give us an idea of your involvement in that and what a healthy Christian nation should look like at the end of this long, many-year project that we're embarked on.
Right, yeah. Well, yeah, it feels like a multiple-year project. And this is all, wave a magic wand kind of thing. But if all the Christians, the committed, moral Christians out there that aren't registered and voted, and the ones that are registered and not voting actually voted, the country would look different, like in a cycle, easily. It'd be a completely different scenario because that number is so big. You and I have looked at this for a number of years, and we're doing lots here at Restoration of America to influence our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ to say, hey, go out there and pursue righteousness by voting. And that's clearly your call to, that's your duty as a Christian to pursue righteousness. And it's also your civic duty to go vote. So, go do it, right? And then if that were to happen, a lot of these things, like you're talking about, the policies that we need to, put in place to get young couples to marry and incent them to, hey, let's start having kids and all this stuff, those would happen very quickly because you'd have more and more of the right people in office, and the people that maybe they're like, gosh, I don't know about all this kind of policy for the families and stuff. They would recognize that, well, if I don't, this is what the country wants now, and this is the direction I have to go. So that's how politics works. People get in office and they're worried about their next election. And if you have enough people saying what they need to hear, that they will eventually do that thing. So that's the way it's got to work. And then we got to get into we got to restore the culture. I mean, we got to, we need to talk about, we need to ban free pornography. We need to go back to getting rid of pot. I mean, the whole marijuana everywhere. It's just so stupid, right? Everybody's like, Why did we do this? And now we got all these problems. There's just a whole host of things that we could just be like, that was dumb. We need to stop doing it because it's ruining our young people and ruining lives. And what do we need? We need to have our young people saying, hey, I want to get married and have kids and do the thing. It's great. It's a wonderful thing. You've got this great family. You've got these little kids. I got grand. It can't be replaced. It's a wonderful thing. And so let's go down that path and say, let's say this is the direction we want to go, and let's start making some changes policy wise. And I think everybody, and then more Christians will start voting and things will go better. The country would start flourishing more. People would have more upbeat attitude. And then, lo and behold, you get more of the good stuff, and that's how it works. And so we just have to get serious about that and go down that path more so than we've ever been, because it's pretty dire out there in some circumstances, especially for the younger generation.
Yeah, I mean, it is a deep comfort to think the culture war will end when Christians decide to win it. We have the numbers. We know what we're supposed to be doing. Well, Doug Truax, thank you so much for your time and all the work that you're doing for our country.
Yeah, you bet, Hayden. Thanks for having me on.
I'm Hayden Ludwig, and this is Restoration Spotlight, a project of Restoration News, your source of headline-smashing investigative journalism for the America First movement. Check us out at restoration-news.com. Until next time, stay vigilant and trust in God.